afternoon and welcome to the Lucas and Lucas podcast. It is August 11th, about 5:30 Eastern time, joined by Lucas Frankel as always. I'm Mike Lucas, and Frankel, for a second there, we thought Kevin Durant was our hero. For a second, we thought Kevin Durant was our devil. For a split second, we thought he may have just been one of us, but as it turns out, Kevin Durant is not. This week, it came out that he demanded Sean Marks and Steve Nash be fired or trade Kevin Durant, which has brought these rumors back to light. And Frank, I'll set you up on a tee here. You take it, I'll finish. What do you make of this insane saga, and what do you think of Kevin Durant now after the last month and a half of tumultuousness in the Brooklyn Nets organization?
He is like a child who is in timeout, locked in like a room, and who's like just sitting there banging on the window trying to get out, like no one can hear him. It's the way I perceive this situation. I don't know what he wants. I don't know who he's mad at, what he's mad at. Is he just so angry at the organization for firing like an assistant coach that he was close with? Is he like angry at the Nets for the way they handled the Kyrie Irving situation? I mean, we're seeing now that he's playing, pickup basketball, working out with James Harden in Spain. So I don't know I just don't know what his like point of aggravation is. I have no idea like where this came from. Like he's, at least we're under the assumption that he's calling all the shots here, that they're not making any decisions without, consulting him, running it by him. So he constructed, this team and this organization. So I'm extremely frustrated with Kevin Durant right now. I'm so angry at him. What he is, goes from being, one of my favorite basketball players ever to, back to the way I sort of perceived him before he came to the Nets, which is the guy who, in order to win, had to join, the greatest basketball team ever assembled. And then he leaves, they win it, and they still win. So like, they didn't even need him to win. That's how I sort of view it right now.
Yeah, well, the most baffling thing to me is 2 years ago, Kevin Durant came to the Nets. He said, I want Steve Nash to be my coach. That was his choice. He was with Kevin Durant in Golden State. He had never been a head coach. And Kevin Durant put his neck on the line and said, hey, Sean Marks, you should hire Steve Nash as my head coach, and I'll come here. And guess what Sean Marks did? Said, hey, I have a chance to get Kevin Durant. You want Steve Nash? So be it. And they let Kenny Atkinson go, and they brought in Steve Nash. Now, Doc Brown was the interim coach, but you get what I'm saying. That was the progression. Kevin Durant has turned into this super hot girl that you obsess over. And when you finally get her, you realize that the headaches that goes along with dating the hottest girl you've ever seen are just not worth the benefits of being around an absolute 10. That's the truth. And Durant has almost single-handedly made every stereotype and conjecture about him come true. And it's a shame because Kevin Durant still might be my favorite basketball player in the league. And he is that good and that unbelievable and that talented and that much of a superstar. And I still would cater to his every whim. But it is impossible to look him in the eyes or imagine looking him in the eyes and say, Kevin, what do you want? And accepting whatever his answer is. Because it seems to change on a daily basis. And when it's that frequent change, it's impossible to keep up with the demand. You don't know what Kevin Durant's going to want in 2 days, in a week, in 2 months. And when that uncertainty is ahead of you as a franchise, it's impossible to plan. And it's impossible to build a team around that without knowing that your main centerpiece, the guy that you expect to be the number one piece of your franchise, will be happy. He wanted to play with DeAndre Jordan. Guess what the Nets did? They got DeAndre Jordan. They've done everything they can to kind of cater to what he wants. And when there was a report when they traded James Harden, didn't it come out that Kevin Durant was extremely frustrated with James Harden?
Well, and that's what's confusing now is the fact they're going to Travis Scott concerts together in London. They're working out together in Barcelona. Like, are they like if they're so close and have such a brotherhood with each other, then why couldn't they work it out together? Why couldn't they keep themselves together? Obviously, now we're hearing reports that Kevin Durant either wants to go to the Sixers or the Celtics. And as we stated on this podcast previously, there are 3 teams that are off limits for any Kevin Durant trade. The New York Knicks, the Boston Celtics, and the Philadelphia 76ers. The only contingency is if the Celtics are offering Jason Tatum or the Sixers are offering either Tyrese Maxey and or Joel Embiid in a deal. But you're not going to, because that defeats the whole purpose of acquiring Kevin Durant. So those 3 teams, immediate cross off from Sean Marks or whoever ends up calling the shots for this organization. I am not picking up the phone if any of those 3 teams call. And the fact that Kevin Durant has the audacity to sit there and be like, I want to go to not just any team, but a team in your division and whose fan bases are so close together, who I personally cannot stand either of those fan bases. So the fact that he's doing this is preposterous. I can't believe that he's saying that he wants to go to these two teams and basically completely just destroy everything the Nets have been building for the last 3 or 4 years. He wants to completely tear it down. He doesn't give a crap. I mean, not that he should give a crap, but man, how vicious can you be?
I would take the Celtics off that list. I would make a trade with the Celtics if Jaylen Brown was a centerpiece, because I think that's.
But he wants to play with Marcus Smart. So what's the trade going to be? Kevin Durant for Jaylen Brown straight up?
I'm saying you said those are non-negotiables. I think Boston has the pieces.
No. After what happened with the Pierce KG, Boston, unless they are offering me like something that I literally if they're offering Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, that's literally the only package I would even entertain for Durant from the Celtics. Otherwise, I'm hanging up the phone.
I'm not going that extreme, but I would hate to see him in Celtic green. I would hate to see him on the Sixers. I hate to see him in the Knicks. I hate to see him anywhere but a Brooklyn Nets jersey, frankly. Like, Kevin Durant should be playing for the Brooklyn Nets next year. He's on a 4-year contract. He's under that 4-year contract. He has no leverage really in the situation other than the possibility of sitting out, which I'm not quite sure he'd be willing to do. And frankly, I don't want to find out. But I'm at a loss for words, Frank. It's one of those things that, as much as I want to give players power and say, hey, for the majority of the system, you guys have been screwed around and treated unfairly and not been given the ability to kind of operate as you want. This is where it's gone too far, where a guy with 4 years of contract who helped build this team, who helped pick and choose the players on this team, who pick and chose the coach, who pick and chose his counterparts. The Nets traded an absurd amount for James Harden. They moved mountains to get Kyrie Irving and DeAndre Jordan here. Like, they have done a lot of things Kevin Durant wanted. And it's unfortunate that 2 years ago was the injury bug that struck. I think we could all agree the Nets probably would have won the championship 2 years ago had James Harden and Kyrie Irving not got hurt. This year, this previous season, had this team been healthy, had Kyrie got vaccinated, it's impossible to know what they could have done. And it's not out of the realm of realistic thinking to think that they could have won the NBA championship. So you look at this situation now where the Nets are kind of sitting there in a no-win situation, either keep an unhappy Kevin Durant or trade Kevin Durant. And that you could, in an alternate universe, be sitting here as back-to-back NBA champions with one of the greatest big threes of all time.
I mean, I don't know. The whole, like, the fact that he gave the ultimate, I don't want to talk about, I hate looking at the past, because you know that if Durant's foot was an inch back, the whole season changes, and I'm still blaming Eric Adams. I want to know what James Dolan paid Eric Adams to complete sabotage the Nets, because you can look at whoever you want. You can blame James Harden, you can blame Kyrie Irving, you can blame Kevin Durant, you can blame Sean Marks, you can blame Steve Nash. All of those people have flaws, but if Eric Adams simply creates the common sense ruling before the season that the exemption that he finally decided to do right before the baseball season started because Steve Cohen got in his ear. If that had happened in October, the whole complexion of everything changes. I don't think Harden doesn't request a trade. Kyrie is there the whole year. Durant, everything that sort of went wrong doesn't happen really. I mean, who knows what would happen with Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie always manages to create distractions no matter where he is or what he's doing. But you like to believe under conventional wisdom that if Eric Adams simply allows Kyrie Irving to play basketball games, then none of this is an issue, and the Nets, are all there with their big three players, and this is all different. So if you're asking to blame one person, it's still Eric Adams. Eric Adams single-handedly ruined the Nets' chances of winning a championship, and I will never forgive him from that. And I'm not going to sit here and blame Kyrie Irving or anybody else. Number one culprit right here is Eric Adams, and you really can't convince me of anyone else.
I won't try to convince you otherwise, because that's not even someone who I really put in that pie.
What do you mean?
Okay. I mean, in the grand, Eric Adams isn't the reason this Nets franchise is fallen down.
No, it is. He is 100%. If he simply allows Kyrie Irving to play, James Harden does not, throw a complete tangent and, kick and scream his way out of the organization. And I'm still trying to figure out the root of this Durant thing, because I just don't get it. But apparently I saw recent reports that he was not happy that the Nets made him get vaccinated, and maybe he's 100% supporting Kyrie Irving in the stance that he took. And the fact that he saw the Nets organization treat him over the course of the year, like really rubbed him the wrong way, in addition to firing the assistant coaches that he was really close with. So I don't know. There's a whole, I can't wrap my head around what exactly Durant is thinking. And the fact that he's naming like my worst enemies of teams just makes him public enemy number one for me right now.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I won't necessarily argue with that. I don't know if he's that high on the list. But besides the point. The point of the matter is right now the Nets are in a no-win situation. And I'm not quite sure what the route to a solution is. You can play hardball with Durant because you don't have to trade him. You could do what James Morey, what's his first name?
Daryl Morey.
I'm James. Daryl Morey did with Ben Simmons and say, hey, you don't want to play? Okay, but I'm not trading until the right package is available. And they can do that with Durant and then call his bluff and see if he'll sit. And we'll see what Durant does in that situation. But
and that's what I would do.
Dealing Kevin Durant unless it's for the right deal. And maybe it's not the grandfather's 3 players, 7 picks that we thought it might be. But I'm not giving him away for 50 cents on the dollar. I need at least 85 cents back. And if I have to trade him, I have to trade him, but I am in no rush to trade Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant will not win in this situation and come out unscathed. If he wins and goes to the Celtics or the Knicks or the 76ers, one of the teams that he says he wants to, I'm draining that team of every asset humanly possible, and going to make it as difficult as possible for that new team to succeed under the current situation. So if I'm the Nets with the Celtics, Marcus Smart has to be part of the deal. If I'm trading with the 76ers, which I don't think they have any chance of doing a Sixers deal because Maxi's not a good enough piece as a centerpiece to trade for Kevin Durant. Jaylen Brown is right on the fringe, but he's about as good as you're going to get. I think there's only 2 teams. I think only 2 teams make sense. The Celtics and the Pelicans. The Pelicans are also a team who, I don't know if Durant wants to go there, but Ingram in pieces, or Zion, they probably won't trade Zion, but Ingram in pieces would be some sort of value I could stomach taking back to Durant. But I'm not giving him away if I'm Sean Marks unless the package is right. I'm in no rush, under no circumstance, giving away unless I
So
have to.
Joe Tsai responded to Durant's demand of firing both Steve Nash and Sean Marks by saying that our front office and coaching staff have my support. We will make decisions in the best interest of the Brooklyn Nets. And if in a perfect world, like you just oblige to whatever Kevin Durant says, and if getting rid of Nash and Marks like makes him happy, and that sort of puts an end to all the flames, like the fact that the Nets basically mortgaged their entire future here in the Harden trade, the one that they got from Houston and gave all those, like at that point you've basically already surrendered your organization to Durant's wishes, just based on that trade until those first picks you get, until like you finally get your first round picks back. So, and that's why I would just sort of do whatever he wants. And if that means getting rid of the coach and getting rid of the GM, then like, so be it. Like we're screwed anyway. So you might as well do everything you can to try to, put out the flames and, try to restore, any good vibes you possibly can. That's how I would have handled it. But the reality situation is like, I get that, Joe Tsai can't just bow down to Kevin Durant and make those decisions, even though on the surface it seems like that's what he wants. Sure, we'll just do that and go from there. Like that's not.
Yeah, but who's to say the issue with that though? Who's to say they bring in? I'll use Jeff Van Gundy as an example. I'm not saying that's who they get, but they bring in Jeff Van Gundy in 4 months. KD goes, I don't like Jeff Van Gundy. Bring in a new guy. Like you set the precedent once. It's such a dangerous slope to go down that I don't think it's realistic. And I agree with you. I think if you have to choose between Marks and Nash and Kevin Durant, you pick Durant. Like this is still a championship caliber roster in my mind as currently constructed if Durant's happy and if Irving plays. But I can't predict what is going to go through Kevin Durant's mind in 38 hours. Like how am I supposed to know that whoever I bring in next is going to be what he wants?
So in the grand scheme of things, how is this situation affecting Kevin Durant's legacy?
Now, if he gets out of Brooklyn and/or Steve Nash and Sean Marks get fired, I think it's a black mark on his legacy. He was the guy who hand chose, just like LeBron. LeBron gets knocked for hand choosing his teammates. I want to play with this guy. I want to play with that guy. I want I want Melo on my team. And then you can critique him and say, you know what? LeBron, the player's great. LeBron, the quote-unquote GM's not. With Durant, if this doesn't turn out well, Kevin Durant's a great player. Kevin Durant, the quote-unquote owner, not a good owner. And it's not like the first mark. It's not the second mark. I just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. He's gonna get a reputation as a guy who at the end of his career was very difficult to play with and moved. I mean, look at the list of legends who move from team to team late in their careers. Not often in that sense. And there's a chance Durant plays on 4 different teams in his career and 3 in a 3 or 4 year span. And I think Russell Westbrook's the only guy who's played on 5 teams in 5 years. There's a chance Durant plays on 3 and 5, and that's not what you'd ever expect from a top 12 guy of all time.
The way I view Durant is the only way he won is by latching onto the best team of the last 10 years, and they didn't even need him to win. That's the way I view him. Yeah. Great player, great jump shooter.
They did. Hold on. Let me just stop that for one. They needed him to beat the Cavs in 2016 or 2017. Like that Cavs team was really, really, really good. Was really, really. You got to remember the Warriors won the first one. The Cavs came back, won the second one, and then they got Durant and won 3 and 4. They needed Durant.
They played the Cavs both championship years in 17 and 18.
Yes.
17 was. Those finals I feel like were so. 18 was the year it was the J.R. Smith year that they swept.
Yes.
I don't remember everything that happened in 17. All of that Durant won.
It won 6 games, but those Cavs teams were really good.
I mean, they were good, but I think in the grand scheme of things, though, like the Warriors, with or without Kevin Durant, he didn't improve this. Like it's obviously a great piece to have for them, but the Steph play Durant, they didn't need him. And you saw like this year and this past year in 2015, like they never needed him to win championships. And Durant was just a nice little addition to have, and where he's not the focal point. He was never great enough to be the centerpiece of a team and do whatever it takes to take that team where it needed to go. LeBron had it, Jordan had it, Steph Curry has it, Kevin Durant does not have it. He is a tier below those guys.
I don't know if I fully agree with that, but
Mike, it's literally not debatable. Like Kevin Durant has never been, as Charles Barkley likes to say, the bus driver of a team that wins the NBA championship. He just hasn't.
He won 2 Finals MVPs.
Yeah, but he did it just riding the back of Steph Curry. That's the way I view it.
He won the MVP of the Finals, though. I mean,
I see Iguodala won the MVP of the Finals.
I see what you're saying, but I think when people say the Warriors didn't need him to win a championship, well, they didn't need him to win a championship. They won one before him, and they won one after him. But I don't think they win those 2 in the middle without Kevin Durant, because I think that Cavs team was that good. There were 2 teams that season, the 2017-2018 season, that I think were all-time good teams. Those Cavs teams were unbelievable with Kyrie, Love, and LeBron in his peak. And they needed Durant those 2 years to beat them. Now, it's not to say a credit to Durant, but I think people overestimate, he just joined a team and they did need him to win those 2 championships. They didn't need him to win the first one or the last one, but for those 2 in the middle, they did need Kevin Durant. And I agree. Do I think he can single-handedly carry a team to a championship? We haven't seen it. We haven't seen it yet. But I don't think it's fair to say he's not capable of it when he was a 2-time Finals MVP on a Finals team that beat, in my opinion, a really, 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 really good Cavaliers team.
We'll see. We'll agree to disagree on that one. I mean, people say he outdueled LeBron, but like LeBron, I don't know. Those Warriors teams were all-time teams, and Durant just for me just joined them and just sort of just was immersed in that culture and just added on. But either way, it's a terrible thing for the Nets. We were so excited that this was finally going to be our time to be a great team in basketball, and just not going to happen. I don't think Durant. There's going to be no happy ending here for the Nets. It's just not going to happen for whatever reason, and we'll just have to see where it goes from there. Before we switch to baseball, Deshaun Watson, I don't know what the hell's going on here. It basically seemed like the NFL hired this independent judge to basically, if she were in charge of this situation, what would she do? She decided that it was worth a 6-game suspension. Roger Goodell was like, thank you for your service. I can vehemently disagree with you, and I'm going to do whatever I want. This seems to be how this is going. I don't know what's taking so long. The Browns play a preseason game on Friday, and I think it would be an awful look for the league if he played in that game and then like the next day, like they suspended him for a full year. I feel like the NFL has to get ahead of this here in the next 24 hours. So I feel like something is brewing. But Mike, obviously you're in Cleveland, you know a lot more about this. What do you make of my read of the situation and just the overall situation right now with Deshaun Watson?
No, your read's pretty spot on. it's a tough look for Sue Robinson, who came in and went through the whole hearings and got the written briefs and then took 2 weeks to write her own 16-page report on what happened, only to have the NFL come in and say, hey, thanks for your service, but we're going to do our own thing. And that's essentially what happened here. But we can complain about it. The reality is that's what was agreed to in the CBA. And anyone who's acting shocked or surprised by the situation, well, we're only shocked and surprised because this is the first time it's happened under the new CBA. This was collectively bargained and agreed to. We had Tyvis Powell on the show today. He played on the Browns. He was part of the group of players who signed that collective bargaining agreement. And I asked him today, hey, did you know this was in the deal when you signed it? He said, I had no idea. So frankly, I don't think a lot of players even knew this was part of the deal, but it is. And the reality of the situation is Peter C. Harvey's a friend of the league. He's a friend of Roger Goodell. He's going to do whatever Goodell, frankly, tells him to do. And I think they're prolonging this decision till 4:59 tomorrow at the last possible minute to make the Browns have to scramble as much as humanly possible to deal with it. And nothing the NFL does is unintentional. Their timing, their decision-making, their wording is all calculated out. It's specifically manipulated to sway public opinion. And I would be shocked if Deshaun Watson is on the field tomorrow night, Frank. I think the Browns announced he was going to start to force the NFL's hand to say, hey, make a decision, put up or shut up. And I think the NFL is going to come back and say, we're going to give you an indefinite suspension, Deshaun, at 4:59. You can't play in this preseason game. You can't play until this is rectified. Have fun sitting on the sidelines. Thanks for making the trip. And good luck. We'll see you in court. So I think that's where this is headed.
But I heard that it's sort of from a financial perspective for Watson, it does not make sense for him to drag this out to court because in the grand scheme of things, his salary for the year is $1 million. So like, there's no,
yeah, but if he's
and if it drags into further years, then he really starts costing himself serious money.
Yeah, but if it's an indefinite suspension, the contract, I believe, gets pushed back a year. Like if he doesn't play this year, he doesn't get paid. So there's some, I don't know the exact wording. If it's a 1-year suspension, I think the contract counts. If it's an indefinite suspension, I don't believe it counts. I think the whole contract gets pushed back a year. So next year it'd be $1 million. And there's a lot of legal stuff that I'm not 100% sure on, but I do know for this to count as a full season, he has to play 6 games. And that's why that number 12 is so critical, because if it's a 12-game suspension, he can only play 5 games this season. And that leads to a whole nother smorgasbord of contractual issues, how he gets paid, does his contract roll over, what happens. So there's a lot of legal stuff here that I am not smart enough to dissect and understand. But all I know is it seems like the NFL now is not only out to punish Deshaun Watson, but they're out to punish the Browns. And I think the underlying factor in that is the fact that the Haslams gave him a fully guaranteed contract that was so backloaded, anticipating some sort of suspension this year. So when he did eventually get fined, it'd be a minute amount of his $230 million contract.
So I mean, the NFL's they got to make a decision here. It feels like this has been, just hanging over the entire league here for months, and it can't continue, cannot continue. Mike, the Yankees are terrible. They're 1-6 in their last 7 games. They traded Joey Gallo, and their season has just completely fallen apart. I knew they should have just kept him. Like, if you would just listen to me, it's like crazy that like the Yankees were completely fine with Joe. Like, they weren't like a bad baseball team with Joe. Like, Joey Gallo he can run into a couple home runs. Obviously, I played a part in maybe running him out of town, and the fact that he hears someone screaming in the stands, and not in the Yankee Stadium, but in Cleveland of all places, where he thinks it's like there's only Guardians fans and no one's bother him. But then he hears me, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is spreading around the globe." But you watch him in LA, and he is the happiest person ever. He had a home run. His first one was a Dodger last night, and was doing a post-game interview. It was all smile. I've never literally seen, like, he was so happy. He's so happy now, and the Yankee season is completely falling apart. It feels like it's never going to get rectified. Their bullpen is now in shambles. Their offense with Rizzo came back yesterday, but I believe an 0 for 4, 0 for 5. Stanton still hurt. So, like, everything is just going wrong right now. The silver lining, I guess, is that it's still, I guess, early August, so they still have 5 or 6 weeks to turn this around. But like when they're in this rut, it feels like it's never going to turn around, and it feels like everything the Yankees did in April, May, June, and the first half of July is now basically you can chew it up, spit it out, and throw it out the window. It's basically done with because the season's just falling apart.
I don't know if it's down the wind, but it's certainly not what it was. When you were in Cleveland last month, we talked about the bottom of this lineup. We're like, this lineup's not that good. Like the bottom 6, 7, 8, 9, or really 7, 8, 9 of this lineup's not great. And I think Benintendi, in theory, is an upgrade. He hasn't played that well yet since becoming a Yankee, but I have confidence at some point he can turn it around. But it's baseball, man. You go through stretches. Baseball is the only sport where the best players in the world can look like mediocre players for 3 weeks in a row. Then all of a sudden they snap their finger and they're back to being great. You don't see LeBron go through a 3-week slump. You don't see Tom Brady play terrible for 3 weeks. But if Aaron Judge has a bad month, he has a bad month. It's baseball. Mike Trout does it. Jose Ramirez is like 7 for his last 55, and he's still considered one of the best hitters in baseball. And you have the confidence more that eventually he'll turn it around. Same with pitchers. I mean, they're a little more consistent in the grand scheme of things, but pitchers go through bad streaks too. And I think this is a bad time for the Yankees to have a couple of key guys all go through these mini slumps, but very, 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 very few players go 162 games in a season without having a couple of weeks where they're not playing up to their A game. And the Yankees, for the first 100 games of the year, virtually, they'd all been clicking. A couple of them were due to have a stuff streak, and it's happening simultaneously with injuries. And you look at the lineup now compared to 2 weeks ago, it looks night and day different. And outside of Aaron Judge, none of the guys are really contributing like you hope. But am I starting to totally freak out? Not yet. Like I'm not ready to completely panic, but it is time to start getting a little worried because the Astros are playing very well and other teams in the American League are creeping up just to where it was a 2-team race. Now I think it's kind of a 2.5, 3-team race. So starting to get a little worried.
The biggest concern from the Yankees that I didn't hit on in that first little spiel was the fact that they cannot touch elite pitching. Luis Castillo has faced the Yankees 3 times this year and completely just shut them down every single time. They can't touch him. They scored 3 runs on him in that game that they fell behind 6-0 in the first inning. But ever since, I believe his other 2 starts, he's allowed maybe 1 earned run in like 15 or 16 innings. Like they literally cannot touch him. Max Scherzer completely owned the Yankees, and I believe the 7 innings he pitched against them. Justin Verlander completely owns the Yankees. Like they cannot touch elite pitching. It's almost like they have no chance. So that's my biggest concern is that when it comes to the playoff time, and they're facing, Verlander or, whoever the Astros got going on the hill, it's just going to be, or the Mariners with Luis Castillo. I just don't see how the Yankees can string together enough runs where it's going to matter. Garrett Cole pitched 7 scoreless innings, but it didn't matter because Luis Castillo pitched 8 scoreless innings. And that's my biggest concern. The Yankees cannot touch elite pitching, and that's a huge, huge problem.
Yeah, it's hard to hit Max Scherzer. It's really hard to hit Justin Verlander. Luis Castillo is great, but the Yankees have been especially bad against the guys who you'd expect some of their elite hitters to be able to perform against, and that is concerning, especially in the playoffs where in the past they've really struggled to score runs.
Right, and then the hallmark of those great Yankee teams of the 90s and early 2000s was, they didn't hammer Pedro and Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling and what other great pitchers were around during that time. What they would do is they would make them work really hard and get them out of the game in the 5th or 6th inning, and then they would do their damage against the bullpen. But now with this current rendition, they're not as great at running the pitcher out of the game, and they're going 7, 8 innings, and then you're facing the elite guys in the bullpen in the back end, and it's much harder to score against the elite guys than it is against the middle guys. So that's the big difference I see between the late 90s teams and this version of the Yankees is they're not great at working the elite pitchers out of the game. The elite pitcher goes in, they do what they do, and they just dominate, and then they hand it over to the closer or whoever they got. And it's just, but yeah, man, they have no chance. But the worst part about it is the fact that the Mets are absolutely a wagon right now. They have DeGrom and Scherzer, and their offense is just clicking on all cylinders. I feel like it's going to be Mets Dodgers NLCS, and the winner of that series is probably going to go to the World Series. I can't handle a world where the Mets are in the World Series.
Yeah, it would not be fun. Mets are good. They have 2 of the best pitchers in baseball, 2 of the best pitchers of all time, and their offense is doing what the Yankees aren't right now, hitting the ball. It's that simple. But it's a baseball season. Teams have ups and downs. The Yankees have been up for the first 107 games of the year. They've been down the last 7. They will rebound. It is not time for – the sky's not collapsing. They're still going to win 100-plus games. They're still going to easily win the American League East, but they have to get home field advantage against the Astros. That is a massive race to continue to watch It's not the American League East Division. It's the race for home field advantage in the American League. And then versus the Astros is going to be a hell of a heavyweight fight to the very end.
We'll see how it goes. Yankees 3-game set in Boston this weekend. No Chris Sale, so I feel like the Red Sox are starting to like spin the other way. So I look for the Yankees to go in there, sweep or take 2 out of 3. You can't go to Boston. You can't go to Boston right now against this version of the Red Sox and lay an egg. Like, you got to go in there if they want to make a statement, because the Red Sox, they're basically down and out at this point. Like, they're down, kick them to the curb, put them to sleep, and get the season back on track. I'm going to the game on Monday against Tampa, and I want to be riding a high then, stand back in the lineup. Let's get it right. And I just want to see one more World Series, for the love of God.
Let's do it.
All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Lucas Podcast. We'll see you all next week when hopefully we'll learn something new about Deshaun Watson.